RM Sotheby's is the world's largest collector car auction house by total sales. They are the preeminent market maker of high-quality collector cars and collections, regardless of size or complexity. By working in partnership with the Sotheby's team and its network of 80 offices in 40 countries, RM Sotheby's has established the largest client network of any collector car auction house in the world. Join the RM Sotheby's family by connecting with one of their car specialists at rmsotheby's.com or contact me directly at gstanley@rmsotheby's.com. All right, so welcome to the Collector Car Podcast. It has been a big week. We've got some really exciting news happening in the collector car auction world, and a lot of these cars are very historically significant. So I wanted Ken to be on to talk about a really cool exhibit that he put together in Easton, Maryland at the Academy Art Museum, and it's called Bugatti Reaching for Perfection. So Ken, thank you so much for being, I think this is your third time on the podcast.
I'm happy to be here. Good morning.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And after this, we're going to record your fourth time on the podcast to talk about the 250L and Ferrari that's selling through RM Sotheby's here shortly. But yeah, so this one's all about Bugattis. I have recently really gotten deep into the Bugatti world. I think you know this. I'm writing a fictional thriller novel about one of the missing Bugattis, but I won't get into that here. So you suggested I drop by this gallery in Easton, Maryland, and I was just blown away because it's not only about the Bugatti, the cars, but it's about the family and what an artistic family it was. So if you would, could you give us like an overview about not only the exhibit, but what listeners can expect to see, as well as what it took to get it together?
I'll be happy to do that. So all credit to Lee Glazer, who's the senior curator at Academy Art Museum in Easton. She arrived at the museum as this exhibit was in its planning stages, and not having much knowledge about Bugatti, she quickly got up to speed, and so she deserves great credit. And she helped pull the catalog together, which was really nice. Basically, the exhibit covers Carlo Bugatti, the father, who at the turn of the century was he was a master of unusual furniture, Art Deco furniture, and Rembrandt Bugatti, Ettore Bugatti's younger brother, was a sculptor in bronze. He lived in Antwerp, Belgium, and he was an immensely talented sculptor. Imagine naming your kid Rembrandt. No pressure, right?
High expectations.
but all of the Bugattis were artists. Ettore was as well, before he became an engineer. So in this exhibition, we're showing, we have several cars, but we have 8 sculptures from Rembrandt Bugatti's work, and it came from a collection in Switzerland. And we have several examples of Carlo's furniture. And then, thanks to Judge John North and his son David North, who's a Bugatti restorer, we have a lot of artifacts. We have a Bugatti, a spoked wheel from a Type 35, the first example of a cast aluminum wheel that Bugatti did on that famous Grand Prix car. We have a steering wheel. We have a Bugatti Vice. Everything Bugatti did was artistic. I mean, he left nothing to chance. Everything is designed, sculpted, elegantly presented, and that's, although this is a small museum, that's what this exhibit purports to do. And I know from initial visitors, everybody has been enjoying it. So been fun to do.
Yeah, it's really amazing because it goes beyond the cars, like you said, even to the Vice, like you said. So even the tools they used to create the cars were something special and hand built. So what did it take to bring this together? Because I understand, you're probably pretty quick at getting cars because of your extensive network. And obviously you've been curating collections and exhibits for years. But tell us a little bit about, the furniture, like this is quite an endeavor you took on. Any major obstacles, or did you just put the net out there and people were happy to share?
Well, I can't really claim credit for the furniture and the sculpture. That was all done by the museum staff. Basically, the notion of doing this whole thing came from Judge John North, who has a number of Bugattis. And he and his son David pulled it together. I would have to say I've done 15 exhibitions of fine cars in fine art museums. And in many ways, this was the easiest because honestly, the Norths and Lee Glazer did most of the work. My contribution was to write about everything and help produce the catalog and try to express my enthusiasm for the artistry of what Bugatti is all about. I mean, I'm currently working on an exhibition for the St. Louis Art Museum where I literally have to go to 12 collectors and, beg, borrow, and steal to get the cars. In this case, the Norths owned all the cars. They have a Type 39 Grand Prix car, probably the best Type 57 SC Atlantic in the world, an Eric Koo aluminum body. Everything is genuine Bugatti. And they have an Autolant coupe, an early Autolant Type 57 that was owned by Robert Benoit, who was a famous Bugatti factory driver. So they found the cars, and David and his crew and I kind of shoehorned the cars into the building. One of the biggest challenges with any art museum exhibition is that for the most part, these buildings were never designed to have an automobile in them. So we have to be very creative. In some cases, taking off bumpers or literally using go jacks, and I use the word shoehorning. I've got some pictures of us loading these cars in, and there's barely fractions of an inch on either side to do it. We did a lot of careful measurements, and David and his guys were very skilled. So I encourage people to come visit. It's going to be in Easton, Maryland, until about mid-April. I think it's April 17th.
April 13th.
You're 13th, okay. And Easton is a charming little town. It's right near St. Michael's, and the exhibit pretty much fills the whole museum. So if you're interested in Bugatti or just interested in art, I hope people will come and see it.
Yes, and you are giving a speech. Is that correct? On March the 20th?
Yes, I'm going to talk about the title is Bugatti Marvels and Mysteries, and there are a lot of interesting elements of the Bugatti story. The one that you're writing your book about with the disappearance of a Type 57 Atlantic is one of them. Ken Purdy wrote about a woman named Violette Noisier, who in the 1930s murdered her father for his insurance money so she could buy her boyfriend a Bugatti. I mean, there's that type of thing. And I think people will find 45 minutes of fun if they want to come and listen to this talk.
There is a lot, and it's not just about the cars. So I was researching Rembrandt Bugatti, and obviously you have some incredible artwork. The kangaroo, you have not the iconic Bugatti Royale dancing elephant, but there is an elephant sculpture there, which is really cool because you can see a picture of him back in period in the zoo, I guess, in which he got his subject. But as I was doing my research, Rembrandt is such a tragic story.
Yes.
I've heard two different stories that the dancing elephant, two different stories. One is that he created it in 1903, and then many decades later, they decided to use it for the Royales. The other one I heard is that during World War I, he witnessed zoo animals being butchered to stave off starvation, and to kind of get out of that crazy world he was in, he created the dancing elephant, and then sadly he took his life just maybe 4 years later or so. Which story is correct? Have you been able to dig that up in your research?
Well, the generally accepted theory is that he was terribly saddened by the fact that these animals that he loved and he was permitted to go get in cages, be close to the animals, and when they were being done in, he, as you said, he took his own life very sadly. He and Etcheray, I think, were competing for the affections of Barbara, who Etcheray married, and that might have been an element as well. But I think it's really the fact that the animals destroyed was what put him over the edge.
Right. Yeah. So now, do you have a favorite? Let's play a little game here. Pick your favorite piece of furniture, your favorite sculpture, and your favorite car in the exhibit. Because it's the Atlantic is obviously amazing, but there's a couple other cars in there that kind of were a curveball for me.
Well, Jay Leno likes to joke, when people ask him about his favorite car, he always says, "Which of your children is your favorite?" But I would have to say I've always been a fan of the Bugatti Atlantic. It's just it looks like a car Jules Verne might have created with its with the rivets and the spine and all the rest. So that's hands down. There's a Panther that Rembrandt did. And like so many of his bronze animals, bronze is I mean, it's metal. It's a, and yet somehow with his sculpture, he's put movement into a solid object. So when you look at his sculptures, and it almost appears that they have moved or they're about to move, and they're very, very lifelike. And I don't know how he did it, but the Panther is one of my favorites. And then I really like all the furniture. And I think we have a couple of photos of rooms full of Carlos furniture, and it kind of reminds me of what it must have been like to break into King Tut's tomb. There's an Egyptian quality to this, and it's really bizarre. I mean, it doesn't even look as though you could sit in these things, and yet if you were in that room, you'd be transformed into another century. So I'm not sure I want it in my house, but I'd like to admire it.
Well, it's funny the way you mentioned the Panther sculpture, because I think in my book I said the line something to the effect of they seem to be trying to escape the very form in which they were cast. So they were cast in bronze, but they were trying to get out of that form because it does have a sense of movement and emotion, to the form.
I think that's really well said. It's difficult, and when you're doing animals, and many of these animals are, I mean, they're so lithe, they're animals that move all the time, and you think, oh, bronze is going to fix them in place. Somehow, Rembrandt's bronzes never stand still.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And I'm flipping through the book. You said, be sure you get the book because they're not going to last. And so I highly recommend if you go out to March the 20th to see Ken speak, if they still have some of these amazing books together, be sure to do so. Talk about the Type 45 Grand Prix, a 16-cylinder Bugatti. I did not know such a thing existed. Yep. And what a car.
Bugatti built several of these, and the car that's in the museum is what Judge North likes to call a tool room copy. So it's an actual Bugatti. It's really not a V16. It's really more accurately described as a U16 with the two blocks side by side on a common crankcase. Two basic straight eights, which is what the Type 35s had. And David North says it's really a handful to drive. It's got a longer wheelbase than a Type 35, and it's got all this engine up front. There are four. Bugatti built two, and then I believe that the Norths have one, and someone else has another assembled car. So two real cars, if you will, and two exact replicas. And I think when you hear this thing run, I mean, imagine two straight eight Bugattis at the same time. That ripping calico exhaust sound is it's doubled, so it's very cool.
I can't even imagine hearing that. Just hearing a straight eight Bugatti is amazing. Can't imagine a U16 would be really, really crazy. So let's end this interview. So first off, you'll be there March the 20th. I plan on being there in person as well. And then the exhibit runs through April the 13th, Easton, Maryland. Just a wonderful Bugatti reaching for perfection. Definitely check it out. But let's land on the Atlantic. I've been saying Atlantic. I'm going to go by you because you're the expert. So there were four built. Is that correct?
There were four built. A Colonel Pope was his car is the one that Ralph Lauren has, and he was tall, and so he asked it be an inch taller. So his cars, if you put Ralph Lauren's car, the ex-Colonel Pope Bugatti, alongside the Rothschild car, which is owned by Rob Walton, there's slight differences in the height, and Then there was another car that, gosh, I'm blanking on the name of the Frenchman who owned it, but he was teaching his mistress to drive, and the car
Chicard.
stalled. Francois Sicard, I think. Was it Francois Sicard? I
It
think,
was Antoine and Janine.
and
Uh,
Janine. Yeah.
I've been very in depth with this one right now because it's kind of crazy because that was originally a black one, and then it was repainted like a silver blue. He had wanted one for years, and he bought it
Right.
like in 1952. But he didn't actually buy it. He didn't want his wife to know that he bought it, and so he
Exactly.
had a lady friend buy it. So he's married with 2 kids, doesn't want his wife to know he has yet another Bugatti. He has a lady friend buy it. He's taking his mistress from his mother's house to Paris, and at a train crossing, they get hit by a train and get dragged 750 meters and both die horribly, correct?
Yes. Yeah, they were both killed, and that immediately several lawsuits ensued. The SNCF, the French National Railway, the mother of the mistress, the woman who helped, who he bought the car with, not that's the other mistress. She was involved. It was hung up for years. In the meantime, what was left of the car were a lot of mangled aluminum, one frame rail, and some other parts. And A man named Seydoux, my understanding is he tried to restore it, and subsequently it came to Paul Russell, who took apart the restoration and apparently grafted in whatever aluminum they could save that had been in this wrecking yard while they were waiting for the lawsuits to happen. So to make it even more complicated, this third car was restyled a bit. The hood is a little bit longer. The tail is different. It's very pretty. Some people think Fagoni did it, but we don't know. And that car was restored, and it's currently owned, I believe, by a man in Europe. It's
Yes, I
to
believe
me,
it's a French.
I think it's the most beautiful of them all. But we don't know the origins of and how much of it is original. We did not accept it at Pebble Beach for judging. It was on display there, and the reason being that the feeling was that there wasn't enough of the original car to present. But and that brings us perhaps to the fourth car, which appears in pictures. Grover Williams, the British driver who drove for Bugatti. There's a lovely picture of his wife with several little dogs with this car, and you know better than I, Greg, but I think it was last seen loaded for shipment to the south of France, and it's gone.
Yeah.
And probably is no more desirable lost automobile to find than that car. And so I think it's a very fitting subject for a book, which you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and I was so thrilled to hear that the one that the North recreated is, like you said, one of the most accurate and most beautiful ones ever. So I took a million pictures of that car while I was there because it really is something to behold in person, and I am thrilled to see it again. So, did you have a chance to sit in that car, to drive that car? I imagine it's pretty tight to get in there.
I was a passenger in the Rothschild car. I didn't drive it, but I did drive the replica Aeroleith, which was made of magnesium and done by the Guild of Automotive Restorers and David Granger up in Canada. And I drove that car, and it was the prototype for these Atlantics, and very exciting car to drive. You feel as though you're in like a little bubble, like a chopped coupe maybe, and of course it's Type 57, so it has quite a nice engine response, a fabulous exhaust note, and you really feel as though you're in a piece of history. That car was commissioned by Chris Orstrom, the head of the World Monuments Foundation, and it's been sold, and I think it's in Europe now. But the Atlantic of maybe all the cars in Bugatti's extraordinary repertoire, the Atlantic is kind of shrouded in mystery a little bit. But we also have on display an Autolant. The Autolant was really the production version of the Atlantic. It's a bit bigger, it's a lot more comfortable, a little more practical. So we have them side by side in a room, display room. So when you come to see the exhibit, it's unusual to see either, but to see the two together gives you a whole perspective on what they look like, how they relate, and how they differ.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, one's much more user friendly, I guess is the best way to put it. And just to go back to the aerolith, so that was the first prototype, and apparently it was made out of 98% magnesium and called, I believe it was called Electron.
It was
And
called
that
an
car
Electron. Yeah.
disappeared, correct? Like this, there was rumors it burnt up in a factory fire because it was so flammable, but it kind of disappeared, didn't it?
It's really unclear as to what happened. Some people even think there were two of them. They did show, they showed an Atlantic at the London and the Paris motor shows in 1934 or five, I guess, before they started production of the Atlantic itself. Electron as a company is still in business. So
Wow.
When David Granger decided to make the panels for this car out of electron alloy, he went to electron because magnesium, it's very difficult to weld it without it catching fire. And he said, can you tell me how to do this? He told me this. And they said, we have no idea. If you figure it out, let me know. And David said that magnesium is, it keeps, you can shape it the way you might aluminum, but it wants to regain its original shape, and so there was a lot of work involved in building this body out of electron alloy. And when they started with flat sheets, and they had to form it, and so he said, I don't even know what this thing cost, but apparently it was staggering to do it. But it's nice because I'm not all for replicas, but if it doesn't exist, it's terrific to create an exact copy so people can see what it looked like. And this car is also painted a color they call creme de menthe. It's kind of a, well, if you think of creme de menthe liqueur, it's a shade of green, a light green. And apparently there were some original paintings of this car, which is where David and his restoring group figured out what the color should be. So it's as close to the original as could possibly be. And if you ever get a chance to see it, it's magic.
I'm actually trying to see it, and it is hard to track down. So, and the interesting part was, just to wrap up on the Atlantics, is the jump from that car to the Atlantics. They changed it to more non-flammable alloy, correct? And they,
Yes.
to
But they
honor
kept the
the
rivets.
right, yeah, they kept the rivets, the riveted
Yeah.
spines, which is so iconic about the Atlantics, and so beautiful. And where does the name come from? I found out it came from a guy named Jean Mermoz. So he was a pilot, a French pilot, the first to cross the Atlantic, and he was a friend of Jean Bugatti's. And apparently, he and his crew disappeared one day over the Atlantic, and so to honor him, they named it the Atlantic. So do you have any guesses as far as where the missing La Voiture Noir, the the missing Bugatti Atlantic is? Any guesses?
Well, I'd like to think that somewhere outside of Marseille, it's covered in blankets in a garage. I mean,
Oh, I like that.
that's as close as I could do. A quick note on this too. Jean Bugatti was a very talented guy and designer and so forth, but he worked with a draftsman named Joseph Walter, who doesn't get a lot of credit. But most of what Jean Bugatti did with respect to design, the drafting work and a lot of the completion work was done by Monsieur Walter. So he should get some credit in this. And with respect to your question, I think this car is just too beautiful for anyone to have destroyed it. So I really, I hope that it's alive, and I can't wait to see your treatment of what you think happened and all the people chasing it. So
That's awesome. Well, let's close this episode by telling us, where will you be next? So now this won't post for probably 2 weeks or so. I know you're traveling all over the country and all over the world, judging incredible cars. I know you judge at Pebble Beach. You said you'll be at the time that this comes out, you will have judged at Cavalcade down in Miami. Where can I folks find you in the future?
going to Lugano again to that event. I believe I'll be at Villa d'Este. Those two events back to back last year were kind of the thrill of the year for me. I've had the good fortune to have judged at many concours around the world. And last year, my wife and I figured out we went to 15 different events, and that's probably 3 or 4 too many. So we'll have to see this year. But I've been fascinated with cars since I was 12 years old, and I bought my first issue of Road and Track. So if there's an event with great cars, I'm probably going to try to be there.
Okay, awesome. Well, as always, Ken, thanks for being on the Collected Car Podcast, and I'll see you on March 20th. Okay.
Look forward to it.